Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back, everybody. Super excited to be chatting here with you guys as always. Took a little bit of a break from the podcast, and how you guys doing? How are you enjoying life out there? It's warm and sunny where we are here in California, and the weather couldn't be prettier. So how's it looking your way? Are you guys on the fast track to summer? So I want to take a dive back into some things that we were talking about before the little hiatus, and we are still on the Boys to Men series, where we are talking about wounds in boys and men, and how that impacts their relationships. And of course, today I want to spend some time talking about the mother wound in men, boys and men. And last time, on the last episode, if you haven't checked it out, be sure to do so. I talked about how the father wound impacts men. And the mother wound works a little bit differently, and it shows up in a number of ways. But when men have a mother wound is a result of having a mother that was not available to you, and for any number of reasons. So mother who wasn't emotionally or physically available to you. Either your mom could have had a mental illness, a severe mental illness, and wasn't following her treatment protocol, and so may have been hospitalized for mental health issues. Your mother may have abandoned you. Your mother may have passed away when you were very young. Your mother may have been physically or sexually or emotionally or financially abusive to you from a very young age. Your mother could have been what I like to call, or what's not what I like to call, but what is called an authoritarian parent with an authoritarian parenting style, which means that they were very rigid and didn't really allow for you to have any sort of sense of autonomy when you were growing up. And so you were to do as you were told. And you weren't really seen as a individual person with your own needs and your own identity, type of thing. And you were basically under her thumb all of the time. And that could be for any number of reasons, right? You could have had a mother who was incarcerated, a mother who abandoned you and maybe started a new family elsewhere, a mother with an addiction issue, a mother who, maybe even if you were given up for adoption at some age or removed from your mother's custody or care, by legal intervention. So maybe there was some abuse or things going on, or some severe emotional and physical neglect, and so you had to be removed from custody. So there's any number of reasons why and how the mother wound can show up. And I want to take some time to talk about how that impacts boys and men. So mothers are, when you think about young boys and their mothers are the first woman in their life. They take their cues from their mother in terms of how women should be treated, what type of women to seek out. When they do become young men, they learn how to nurture and foster relationships and friendships and bonding and connection, and also just learning how to connect and validate with emotions with our mother. Our mother is the first person who we see and who we connect with, starting in the womb and then coming outside of the womb and sort of laying on your mother's chest, or you have that bonding time. And when anything interrupts that, or when there's an interruption or an intrusion to that, that can seriously skew things with us for the long haul. And so I want to talk about a few ways that the mother wound shows up, or the different types of mother wounds that we may have. And of course, I have my pad here, so I want to make sure that I don't forget some things that I definitely want to talk about. And I'm going to mention just a few here. I won't go too much in detail, but I definitely want to touch on some that I think are very important. Um, so one of the ways that the mother wound can show up is if you're a parentified child. And what that means is, starting at a very young age, you may have been told something like, you're the man of the house now, or even if you weren't told that, you were given a lot of responsibility starting at a very young age. And this can happen when there's like addiction in the home, or when your parent is gone, or maybe you have a single parent who's not available, and you may have other siblings that you are sort of told that you're the one left in charge, and you need to manage the home. And so basically, with a parentified child becomes an adult way too soon. And the challenge with becoming an adult is that, again, you become an adult way too soon. So you're hearing, seeing things, before you're really mature enough to understand these things, or you're just sort of being forced into the adult role way too early. And some things that you may be forced into is understanding, maybe hearing some things about finances that you shouldn't have, being privy to arguments amongst your parents that you shouldn't have been hearing, or maybe seeing them engage in behaviors that you probably shouldn't have been seeing. And those behaviors could be something like addictive behaviors and things like that, where you may be forced to sort of try to stabilize what's going on in the home, try to protect everyone physically from chaos that's going on in the home. And so parentified child is not something that just happens inside the home. If you're forced to grow up too early and then become an adult, at the age of like 7 or 8 or something like that, where you have to cook meals and sort of take care of all the errands and things like that, and you're basically running the house at a very young age. That oftentimes continues on through adulthood, even if your parents are, they sort of stabilize or they come back together. The expectation is that, they may still come to you to learn how to manage problems. So they may continue to seek you out to um, do some crisis de-escalation. So anytime there's like a major problem or, conflict, they may come running to you to sort of fix that issue and expect that you're going to take care of everything. You may be the financial provider for everyone in the family. And so, whenever they can't manage their money effectively, or whenever there's some sort of financial crisis, the expectation is that you are going to be able to take care of that throughout the duration of your life. And so a parentified child is, again, that's someone who becomes an adult for the long haul for their family. It's not just a one and done type of thing. And this does a lot of damage, because with parentified children, you never really have a chance to develop a healthy childhood. They never have a chance to really play and really sort of develop their interests and likes and put themselves first, right? They never get a chance to be selfish and have that sort of selfish, self-absorbed child life, which can impact them again as an adult, where you're constantly putting everyone's needs ahead of your own, and you're sort of, you could do it to your own. You oftentimes do it to your own detriment, where you basically ran into the ground emotionally, physically, or financially, just because you continue to take care of people, which can also bleed over into you creating your own family or your own relationships, right? Because if your family of origin is taking up so much of your time, energy, and finances, you really don't have very much energy left over to dedicate to developing your own adult relationships or your own family, that you want to put your own effort into, because that's already spent still taking care of adults who are very dysfunctional. Another way that the mother wound can show up is mothers who treat their sons like their boyfriend or their husband, and so basically the boundaries are very blurred, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a relationship where there's any sort of sexual incest going on, but there is certainly some emotional incest going on. And there's a show, I can't remember the name of it. I think there might be actually be like two shows, but I think there's one specifically for mothers who are very enmeshed in their sons' lives. And then there's like another one, I think it's called Smothered, if my memory serves me correctly. If you want to get a clearer picture of what this looks like in real time, mothers who don't have great boundaries with their children, their daughters, there's some relationships with daughters and sons up there too. But you can get that show covers it, and you can get a sense of mothers who treat their sons like lovers and things like that. And so basically, these are the types of relationships where mothers expect their son to do everything with them. They expect to be the priority in their son's lives, and so they spend every waking moment thinking about their son, and they want their son to spend every waking moment thinking about and prioritizing them as well, oftentimes wanting their sons to live with them for forever. They may want their sons to sleep in the same bed with them. They feel incredibly threatened if their sons decide to pursue a romantic relationships, and will oftentimes mothers will wreak havoc on those types of relationships that their sons attempt to build, or when they try to get married, they will create all sorts of problems and dysfunctions because they don't like the fact that another woman or another person may be entering the picture, because they feel very threatened by that, and they view their sons as their personal property, right? My son is an extension of me, and my son does, I feel like my son is leaving me, or they are betraying me somehow should they decide to pursue their own relationships. And so they sort of wreak havoc on that, right? And then thirdly, when men have trust issues with women, so may have men who date serial daters, and they don't really sort of develop any deep connections with women, or when they see that things might be getting serious in a relationship, they tend to flee, right? They're like, I'm out of here. I don't want a commitment. That actually scares me. I don't know that I could trust that this will be a good relationship, or that you are really for me. And so they may engage in all types of self-sabotage if they have trust issues with women. So they may make sure to kind of always have a woman plan B, meaning that they always have women or other people to sort of fall back on so that they don't get too seriously emotionally invested with one person or with one relationship. And they may always sort of check out or emotionally disconnect, ghosting, things like that. So they find ways to withdraw or avoid getting into a serious commitment or getting close to anyone really, just because they don't they have a difficult time learning to trust. And again, this is comes from the mother wound, right? And not being able to learn how to trust women and how to sort of assess and gauge for women who are trustworthy. They don't feel like they have a skill necessary to engage. And oftentimes, when they don't feel like they can trust themselves in order to vet people properly, a lot of times what they'll do in the as a way of self-sabotaging, they will actually choose women who are very dysfunctional, very chaotic, very untrustworthy women, or women who have a string of issues, right, that they can't trust, versus when they have someone who may be trustworthy, who may be reliable, who may be consistent, and who may have their stuff together. They typically tend to avoid that and go towards a more dysfunctional woman that they feel a lot more comfortable with. And there's a saying, the discomfort that you know is more comfortable than the discomfort that you don't know. So that means that people are more willing to stay in a toxic situation because they know how that sort of plays out. They've been around that. Um, they've been programmed to sort of deal with that all of their lives. And so logically, even though they may know that a person is dysfunctional and unhealthy, it may feel much more safer to them and much more normalized to them because that's something that they've been used to dealing with. And part of how these men may self-sabotage is one that they may avoid, again, avoid commitment issues. And avoidance comes in a number of ways, right? Avoidance and escapism, I should mention, because I feel like they run along the same thread. And that could come in, the form of having multiple women that they're dating, multiple affairs. They're not physically or sexually pursuing a woman. What they may be doing is they may be sort of engaging in emotional affairs, or they may also be engaging in something imaginary escapism, which is called limerence, which I've done an episode on limerence, where they're sort of imagining themselves being with other women in sort of this like fantasy world. So they're using escapism through fantasy as well, which brings me to the next point. The way that the mother wound shows up is men who have addiction to pornography, right? And pornography is an excellent example of avoidance and escapism, and also like that to a certain point, like that imaginative component, right? Which sort of feeds into that, because porn is not real. When you think about having sex or intimacy with a real person, most people don't have sex lives that mirror pornography, right? But that may be something that they try to obtain. And if a man has a mother that doesn't have emotional intimacy and doesn't have any sort of physical intimacy, meaning that their mother can be emotionally cold, they could be distant, they could be aloof, they could be the types of mothers that don't say, I love you. They could speak very harshly. They may, they may have mothers that don't ever give hugs or show appropriate forms of affection. They're much more prone to have a porn addiction if they were never shown any forms of healthy love physically or emotionally. And that's one of the ways that porn develops is not being able to show, not being shown what healthy forms of affection are, and also, sort of that escapism to try to connect on an intimate level. And you oftentimes, even with men who may have porn addictions or may have trouble with being vulnerable or being emotionally intimate with someone. You may experience a man being physically intimate with someone, but after, kind of after sex is over, they really don't engage with you physically. Like they're not really holding hands, they're not really hugging, they're not really kissing that much. In fact, they're kind of um and they push away physical forms of affection. And even if they could be very passionate in the bed when when you're having sex, they still may push away affection in other ways, and they may actually not engage with you outside of having sex. So they're not going to be hand holders, they're not going to be huggers, they're not going to tell you that I love you or do things that are super affectionate. And a lot of times that results from having a mother that was very distant, very cold, very aloof, and was not very affectionate or vulnerable, and didn't model or show healthy forms of affection towards their children. And the last point I'll talk about is men who have a mother wound, or maybe there'll be two more. So just like I talked about, um, men who I kind of touched on this a little bit, but there are men who chase women who are not emotionally available, right? They may tend to chase women who are um, cold, distant, women who may also be downright abusive, may be very manipulative, right? And they may continue to go back into relationships that are very toxic and very unhealthy, right? And again, that's sort of following the narrative of this is something that is very familiar to me. And it's like a pattern, it's like a story that I get stuck that they may get stuck in, right? And it kind of repeats itself over and over is because they're constantly trying to chase their mother's love, and they may constantly be sort of this can parallel itself in the relationship where they're constantly trying to chase love, attention, and validation from other women. And so, when you have that mother wound in men, it results in men feeling very insecure and needing that validation from other women. And so they try to recreate the same story with a different ending. Like, if I pursue this woman, even though she's very similar to what I know, the dysfunctional woman that's not very healthy, not very goal oriented, and we don't necessarily share the same values, but perhaps the story can have a different ending, even though I know it's not a good relationship for me. So you may be drawn to that toxicity, and very similar to being drawn to women who are toxic. You could also be drawn to environments that are toxic and chaotic too. So, again, if you grow up in a home, if your mother had a home that was very chaotic, very unpredictable, you could also be drawn to just unpredictability and chaos and danger, or just situations that are very unhealthy. So people in part of that also too, in addition to being drawn to the danger, there's a part of you that may also be drawn to rescuing people from danger, right? So rescuing women from danger, rescuing women from addiction, rescuing women from financial problems or challenges where they're not able to care for themselves, and always being seen as sort of the person who can sort of ride in and save them, the knight in shining armor. And lastly, what I'll mention about, one other way that this shows up in men is men who have mother wounds may not respect women. So this shows up in misogyny, misogynoir. You see a lot of people that reduce women down to, it's almost like you reduce women down to a brand item, like, oh, I like this woman because she's pretty and it's going to make me look good and I'm going to get validation from my friends for being with someone like that, but I'm not really invested in who this woman is. It's more about how this woman makes me look, how this woman makes me look in the world of others and other people. So we're seeing these new sort of phenomenons that are kind of being highlighted. I guess they're not really new, but what I will say is more of like the highlighted, or they're being highlighted or celebrated. And, one of them is called passport bros, right? Where you have these men that are like, I'm not, American women are not for me. I can go over to another country and basically do little to nothing to get a woman from outside of the United States. I don't really have to work that hard to impress her, and I can treat her in any way I want to, and I'm going to get a quality wife in return for very little to no emotional labor. And so that's another phenomenon that's sort of developing out of that. And you could sort of see some of the challenges that these men may be having with women, and how that can more than likely comes from a mother wound. So when you have men who are very sort of derogatory or hateful or sadist, there are men who can be very sadistic towards women, then they typically have a mother wound. I hope that's been helpful in sort of talking about how the mother wound shows up, and in terms of learning how to heal from the mother wound. I think the first step is certainly to have the awareness. And, awareness can come through a variety of ways, through talking with a therapist. There's also, the attachment inventory. And I recommend that if you have, or if there's any sort of concern or wonder if you have any sort of attachment issues, I recommend, you seeing a mental health professional who can give you that assessment and sort of go over that with you. In fact, it's one of the outcomes of the attachment inventory that often is indicative that people have a parental wound. It's um, people who say that they have a great relationship with their parent. However, they're unable to elaborate. Like, they can say, like, these are the types of people that say, you ask them how their relationships with their parents are and how it's been throughout the duration of their life. And they say, it's good, it's great. Me and my parents were close. We have a great relationship. But then when you ask them to sort of expand on that, they're not able to really provide any sort of concrete examples or talk about ways in which they are close with their parents. And so that's one of the back doorways, and where you could determine rather quickly that there are some challenges, and that there's some wounding in the parent area. Typically, is when there's this, like, and it's not meant to be malicious, or it's not meant to be a lie. It's just sort of it's the way that a coping mechanism that people tell themselves, like, okay, we're fine. We have a good relationship. It's sort of a way that people sort of self-soothe, if you will, to try and stay connected to a relationship that's very dysfunctional or that does not meet their emotional needs. And so they tell themselves these narratives that, we actually have a great relationship. And when you have to sort of break that down and parse that out a little bit more. And so, the attachment inventory, adult attachment inventory, can be a great way to sort of start those conversations and gain that awareness, or as well as talking with a licensed mental health professional, want to do that assessment and to talk about deeper attachment issues. And in fact, it's one of the ways when I meet with my clients, that is what I do from the very first session, is talk about those relationships and take a deeper dive. Um, and so again, that awareness. Number two, understanding where your relationship is. So again, there's the awareness that, things aren't good, but then also understanding that, maybe things aren't good and they need to change. I need to change because it's actually harming me. It's harming my relationships. Now, how do I want to do that? And so that's again where another mental health professional could come in and help you understand how you want to do that. Because there's some people that, even if their relationship with their mother is very dysfunctional, they absolutely do not want to lose that. They want to keep that. And so working with someone to determine how can we make this work for you in a way that's emotionally healthier, right? Because as long as you maintain the relationship, there is a potential risk that the relationship will still cause harm. And so just having that awareness and understanding of how you want to do it, and be intentional about, being good to yourself, being intentional about like creating the relationships that you want, and being intentional about stopping the cycle of challenges of wounding in parents, I think is another great thing to do. So you want to be intentional, and being intentional doesn't mean just saying that, I don't want this to happen anymore. I've seen this happen, and logically up here, I know that I don't want to do it. Being intentional means, no, I'm going to do the work to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. I'm going to do the work to make sure that the cycle of wounding stops with me, and that this is not going to be something that I'm going to do. And part of that intentionality is doing things opposite of what your parents did, is sort of honoring yourself, living in your truth, validating yourself, validating your emotions and your experiences. Okay. And so I hope that this has been helpful, and I just kind of wanted to give like a brief overview. Of course, there's so many other ways that mother wounding can show up and impact men, but I wanted to give something kind of quick and dirty, no pun intended, so that you guys can get sort of a glimpse into things. And if you'd like to learn more about me, you can check me out on drnataliejones.com, and definitely check out other episodes of the podcast, because they definitely speak way more in depth about a lot of the other wounds that I've talked about here, and extras. So you have a plethora of information there. If you found this podcast helpful, be sure to like, share, and review. And until next time, you guys take care of yourselves, stay out of trouble, and be well. Bye-bye now.